Chioma, a stunning maiden from the village of Fuko, had captured the attention of all the men in the community. It was said that whenever she walked by, everyone would stop to admire her beauty. Even men who were with their wives would often turn their heads to catch a glimpse of her. Chioma was well aware of her beauty, but she didn't let it make her vain. She remained humble, intelligent, and hardworking. The village of Yukodo had a long-standing tradition passed down for generations, the Maiden's Bride Day. Every year, the villagers would gather for this event, where young women of marriageable age would cross a ritual fire to prove their virginity. It was believed that those who were not virgins and dared to cross the fire would fail and face humiliation or even punishment. On the other hand, those who successfully crossed the fire received gifts from eligible bachelors as a symbol of appreciation for their virtue. This event often led to many marriages, as it was a prime opportunity for men to choose their brides. Chioma and her best friend, Yudoka, were always excited to participate in this ritual. However, because of Chioma's extraordinary beauty and the admiration she received, she was disliked by most of the other maidens in the village. Many of them refused to include her in their friend circles. Chioma didn't mind, as her childhood best friend, Yudoka, was always by her side. Their friendship was admired by all, as the two were inseparable since childhood and had carried their bond into adulthood. One day, as they walked along the market road, the prince passed by with his guards. He turned to look at them but said nothing. Yudoka, blushing, whispered to Chioma, "I think the prince likes me." When I turned, our eyes met. "Can't you see how handsome he is?" Chioma, unimpressed, replied, "Yudoka, stop it. What makes you think the prince would be interested in commoners like us? We don't belong to his class." But Yudoka couldn't stop giggling, convinced that the prince had admired her. As they were about to take the path leading to their home, they unexpectedly ran into the prince again. This time, he spoke. "Hello, ladies," the prince greeted them, before turning to Chioma. "May I know your name?" Yudoka was furious. In her mind, she thought, he didn't even notice me or ask for my name. What nonsense! The prince exchanged a few words with Chioma and then walked away. After he left, Yudoka became silent. Chioma, noticing her friend's mood, asked, "Aren't you going to ask me what the prince said?" Instead of replying, Yudoka frowned and walked away, leaving Chioma stunned. She stood still, confused by her friend's behavior. The next day, Chioma went to Yudoka's house to ask why she had acted so strangely. Yudoka apologized, claiming she had a mood swing, and the two laughed and played as usual. That evening, the town crier announced that the prince would choose his bride on Maiden's Bride Day. All the eligible maidens were required to attend, and each one would cross the ritual fire to prove her virtue. The entire village was abuzz with excitement, as the event promised to be grand. While most of the maidens were thrilled, a few, especially those who were not virgins, were uneasy. As the day approached, Yudoka grew increasingly restless. Deep down, she knew the prince liked Chioma. "All my life, Chioma has been the center of attention for every man," Yudoka thought bitterly. "I am beautiful too, but no one sees me the way they see her. I have always let her have her way, but not this time. The prince must notice me." Determined, Yudoka grabbed a water pot and headed to the stream alone. On her way, she heard a noise coming from the bushes. Curious, she followed the sound quietly. To her shock, she discovered one of the village men secretly making out with a married woman. Just as she was about to scream, the village man, Madhu, knelt and pleaded desperately with Yudoka. "Please, don't report me. I beg you," he said. Yudoka smirked and replied, "I know you, Madhu, and I will report this abomination. You are aware of the consequences, aren't you?" Madhu trembled as Yudoka continued, but then a mischievous idea flashed through her mind, and her expression changed. Smiling, she said, there's only one way I will keep silent, you must do something for me. Relieved, Madhu quickly agreed. I will do anything. Just don't report us. Udoka felt triumphant, her plan falling into place far easier than she had expected. She leaned closer and whispered the details of her scheme to Madhu. His eyes widened in shock. I thought Chioma was your best friend, Madhu said, hesitant. Best friend? Udoka scoffed. A best friend who takes all the attention while I stand in her shadow. Why am I even explaining this to you? Just do what I asked, Madhu. I don't owe you an explanation. Madhu nodded reluctantly and walked away. Later that evening, as planned, Madhu snuck into Chioma's home while she was asleep. Meanwhile, Udoka waited nervously behind a nearby bush. Shortly after, Madhu returned. Is it done? Udoka asked eagerly. Yes, Madhu replied, his voice low. I followed your instructions. She passed out, and I did what you said. Udoka's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Are you sure she didn't see you? No, Madhu assured her. My face was covered, and she was already asleep when I got in. Udoka beamed with excitement and went home, her heart filled with malicious glee. Now Chioma is no longer a virgin, she thought. Let's see how the prince will choose her now. The next morning, Udoka hurried to Chioma's home, anticipating her friend's confession. When she arrived, she found Chioma crying. Stop crying, Chioma. You know, when you cry, it makes me want to cry too. What's wrong? Udoka asked, feigning concern. Chioma wiped her tears and shook her head. It's nothing, Udoka. I'm just feeling sad. Inwardly, Udoka smirked. She's too ashamed to admit it. Well, if she won't tell me, she will have to face the whole village on the ritual day. Outwardly, Udoka comforted her. Don't cry, my dear friend. Please, stop crying. It hurts me to see you like this. When the long-awaited ritual day arrived, Udoka was brimming with excitement. She dressed in her finest outfit, determined to steal the show. Early in the morning, she went to check on Chioma, only to find her friend still not ready. Chioma, what are you doing? Udoka asked, feigning surprise. Why aren't you dressed? The prince might choose you. You can't afford to slack off. Udoka handed Chioma some clothes. Come on, let's go and show everyone how beautiful you are. Inside, Udoka was thrilled, thinking, I can't wait to see her humiliated in front of the whole village. Chioma, still quiet and sad, thanked Udoka for her support. You have always been there for me, Chioma said softly, unaware of her friend's true intentions. With Udoka's help, Chioma got ready, and together they headed to the ceremony. The event was grand, with villagers from neighboring communities in attendance. The prince, his guards, and even the king and queen graced the occasion. As the maidens began crossing the ritual fire, the excitement in the air was palpable. Udoka was brimming with confidence, imagining Chioma's humiliation. It's her turn to fall, Udoka thought, her heart racing with anticipation. When it was Udoka's turn, she crossed the fire gracefully, her eyes fixed on the prince as she gave him her most charming smile. But the prince's attention was elsewhere, his gaze was fixed on Chioma. Prince Obina, a gentle and humble man, already knew who he wanted. The prince had already done his research about Chioma and was impressed by all the positive feedback he received about her. When it was Chioma's turn to cross the ritual fire, the prince smiled and admired her with great interest. Meanwhile, Udoka, standing at a distance, waited anxiously, eager to witness Chioma's humiliation. To everyone's surprise, Chioma turned to look at the prince, nodded slightly, and announced she wouldn't be able to cross the fire. The village maidens erupted into laughter, mocking her openly and calling her names. Udoka, with a racing heart, felt victorious, but the prince was visibly shocked. The prince stood up and asked, "Chioma, can you tell us why you won't cross the ritual fire?" With calm confidence, Chioma replied, "My prince, my best friend here, Udoka, told me not to cross the fire." Everyone gasped in shock. Why would she say such a thing? Someone from the crowd asked. Udoka quickly shouted, "Chioma, you're lying. Why would I ever tell you not to cross the fire?" Chioma turned to Udoka and calmly asked, "So, are you saying you want me to cross the fire now?" Udoka stammered but said, "Yes, of course, my best friend." With no hesitation, Chioma crossed the fire successfully. The crowd erupted in joy, clapping and cheering loudly. Even those who mocked her earlier were now filled with excitement and happiness. Chioma had stolen the spotlight of the day, and the prince was thrilled. Then, in the middle of the celebration, Chioma turned to Udoka and said, "Do you know why I have been crying for days? It's because the saddest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. It comes from those you trust the most. I trusted you with my life, Udoka, but what did you do? You tried to take the most valuable thing from me, my dignity." She paused, allowing the silence to settle before continuing. "But I have good news for you, Udoka. Madhu didn't do what you asked him to do." The crowd fell silent, shocked by Chioma's words. Chioma then turned to address the villagers. She explained how Udoka had sent Madhu to violate her while she was sleeping. Madhu couldn't bring himself to commit such a wicked act, Chioma explained. Even though his face was covered, he woke me up before doing anything. I was about to scream, but he quickly covered my mouth and whispered into my ear, telling me that Udoka sent him. He told me everything, how she blackmailed him and warned me to be careful because Udoka was far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Udoka, now exposed, couldn't hide her shame. The villagers looked at her with disgust. The king ordered that Udoka be punished for her malicious attempt to destroy Chioma's life. The prince, deeply impressed by Chioma's strength and honesty, then asked her to marry him. The villagers cheered in support, and the couple had a grand wedding ceremony. The story ended with everyone celebrating their union, and the entire village was happy for them. This story teaches us an important lesson: jealousy can come from those closest to us, and we must always be cautious and alert. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more stories.